Hello fellas, welcome to our channel. In this video we are going to see, what if Deku was raised by Knull, the god of Symbiotic? Part 3, and for more comment down your thoughts and like share. Also don't forget to check out author of this story named The Venom Inside by legionnaireblaze in Theoredeemer 1995. This story written by two authors, so check out both of them and check out my Patreon for new uncensored and demanding lemon fiction. All details in description. Tsunade I looked back over his shoulder where Izuku, Mirio and Eri were all laughing and smiling. He and a few others would need to keep an eye on the Midoriya boy even if it turned out he wasn't Venom, somehow. Then again, Midoriya was supposed to be quirkless, so maybe his suspicions did not have merit after all. Regardless, the fact still remained that Venom only attacked Overhaul after Midoriya had fled with Eri, rather than around the same time, if the witness testimony was to be believed. Back with Izuku, Eri, and Mirio. So, you're going by the hero named Lemillion, the man who would save a million lives? Izuku asked Mirio, a small smile on his face. Such idealism reminded him of himself until he finally began to accept reality for what it truly was. Izuku gave an amused chuckle. Talk about swinging for the fences. Then again, I guess delusions of grandeur are part of what makes a hero in this day and age. Mirio frowned. What, you don't think I can do it? He asked Izuku. I think you can do it, Mirio. Eri said happily. Izuku couldn't help but look at Eri with a small smile. The faith and naive innocence of a child, particularly one who had been through hell and back as Eri had, was truly something else. If only there was a way to preserve it forever, even after reality did everything it could to crush it. Izuku sighed. You wanna know why I helped you, even after you told me about your curse, Eri? Izuku asked the young girl. I helped you because I'm cursed too, said Izuku sadly. My curse is not having special powers at all. Not super strength, not super speed, not construct creation stemming from my willpower, rage, or ability to instill fear or hope, nothing. And ever since I found out about it, I've had to suffer every day of my life. My best friend betrayed me and used me as his personal training dummy for 10 years straight, my only other friend. Left me forever. Everywhere I went, people hurt, belittled, demeaned, humiliated, bullied me, or just stood around and watched if they weren't putting others up to making my life and the lives of people like me a living hell. Although I expect anything I've been through is nothing compared to what you've been through, Eri. That's why, I don't think saving a million lives is a very realistic goal, Izuku said as he stared down at the ground. If someone could save a million lives, then someone would have saved me and others like me a long time ago, and so many people who took their own lives over something they had no control over would still be among the living. If someone could save a million lives, my friend would still be here and he'd likely be a student here at this very school. No matter how many lives are saved, there's always someone who gets left behind, forsaken and forgotten. Like I was. The next thing Izuku felt was Eri launching herself at him like a small ballistic missile, her arms wrapping around him in as big of a hug as she could manage, while Mirio could only look on, coming to terms with just how badly hurt the green-haired boy sitting beside him truly was, his leg injury notwithstanding. It's okay, Izuku. There's no need for you to be so sad anymore, Eri said. Why, Eri? Because I am here. Eri said looking up to Izuku with a bright smile. Izuku felt himself smile in return. It had been a long time since that sentence had made him smile like he was now, and he felt tears begin to form in his eyes as he returned Eri's hug. Thank you, Eri. He said as he tried to hold back his tears. As Mirio watched the scene unfolding before him, someone knocked on the staff room door, causing the older boy to stand up and make his way over to the door and open it to find a female staff member standing there, relaying something to Mirio, before departing. With a sigh, Mirio turned to face Izuku and Eri. Sorry, guys, but there seems to be a situation developing. I need to get Eri to safety and make sure you get out of here, okay, Izuku, he said. Izuku frowned, wiping his eyes as he spoke. What's going on? He asked the older boy before something faintly pinged on his symbiote sense, but there was something funny about this ping in particular. No way. It can't be. Dare I hope. Venom muttered inside Izuku's mind before Mirio spoke up again. The staff lost contact with the USJ, explained Mirio. USJ? Universal Studios Japan. Izuku asked, confused why UA would be in contact with them. No, the unplanned simulation joint. Normally, this wouldn't be cause for quite as much concern, as these things do happen from time to time, normally from quirks interfering with electronics. But apparently a few days ago, someone destroyed a security gate and got their hands on the UA schedule for today, so the staff is taking additional security precautions. Now come on, let's go. Izuku nodded and stood up, Eri holding his hand the whole way to the exit. With a quick promise that he'd come back and hang out with her again sometime soon, Izuku made his way to the gate leading out of the UA grounds, only to stop in his tracks and glance around. making sure there was no one around in his immediate area before ducking into a nearby shadowy corner just outside of the security camera's line of sight. Mask. Copy. Venom said as he formed over Izuku, and the two leaped up to the roof to see where the USJ building was before noticing a trail of dust coming towards UA from a nearby building. Bingo, Venom and Izuku thought before the duo leapt off the rooftop. Unplanned simulation joint, a few moments later. For the longest time, Tamura Shigaraki had always been a believer in the ancient video game mantra that winners didn't use cheats. Now however, he realized that he was sorely mistaken to believe that. That green sludge that sensei had him bond with was making him feel amazing. Like he could climb mountains. Or crush them beneath his heel after decaying them and making them crumble. Plus, it had managed to heal the cracked skin that had long been a side effect of his decay quirk, which admittedly, was a bit more disconcerting. He had grown used to the feeling of the perpetual itchiness enough that, and with it gone, he had developed a tic of scratching his neck when stressed. And boy was he feeling stressed in his first real fight against pro heroes, even with a bunch of NPCs, a massive synthetic creature with an exposed brain known as a Nomu, and Kurogiri as their getaway driver. Or, getaway warper, technically, he supposed. As it turned out, these snot-nosed little kids were actually holding their own against the NPCs he'd brought along to keep the other pros busy, while the Nomu dealt with All Might. In fact, it had gotten to the point where Shigaraki had been forced to let Nomu off his leash early to deal with the Mook heroes before All Might had even taken the field. Having others fight for you? How much of a coward are you? Eraserhead yelled at Shigaraki. Don't you know anything about games, Eraserhead? Before you can fight the boss, you need to beat the mid-boss first. Shigaraki chuckled as the Nomu fought Eraserhead, the underground hero being perpetually forced on the defensive, just trying to do what he could to stay out of the way of the creature's attacks. However, everyone in the USJ's attention was quickly diverted by the sound of shattering glass as something big and black came crashing through an overhead window and landing on the ground, leaving a small dent where the figure landed. Ladies and gentlemen, heroes and villains alike. The cavalry has arrived. Venom cackled as he stood up to his full height and let out a ferocious roar. Venom? Why are you here? Shigaraki asked as he itched the back of his neck furiously. Oh, we just happened to be in the neighborhood. We felt like cracking a few skulls, and wouldn't you know it, you and your goon platoon just so happened to be attacking our friends. Snarled Venom as he lumbered toward Shigaraki, a furious look on his face as the heroes and students in question frowned in confusion. Last time they checked, none of them were friends with the terrifying vigilante. Heck, they barely knew anything about him aside from publicly available knowledge, rumors, and theories. Don't you know anything about games, Venom? You gotta defeat the mid-boss before you fight the boss, replied Shigaraki before Venom laughed and grabbed the scrawny man before he could call for the Nomu to back him up. Don't you know anything about video games? Venom asked snidely before he threw Shigaraki across the room. You beat our mid-bosses, so welcome to the boss fight. Venom leapt across the room to where Shigaraki had landed and tried to pummel him, only for his eyes to widen in shock at two things. One was his punch being caught by someone who looked so malnourished, the other was that the hand was covered in green slime, which then covered the rest of the boy's body and formed into another symbiote. Dark green, tall, and lanky, with 4 tendrils waving behind it. Sorry Tommy, but like Harbinger, I'm assuming direct control, the green symbiote said with a leering smirk. Another symbiote. Izuku exclaimed from within Venom. Lasher? You're alive, Venom gasped with disbelief and hope before Lasher roared and slammed Venom backwards with 2 of the tendrils. And as this happened, those who weren't preoccupied with fighting their own villains looked between the 2 eerily similar, though differently colored, beings in confusion. No thanks to you, Venom. Then again, I can't say I'm surprised, given that you always were goody two-shoes, as they say, Lasher sneered. Well, you've been running around trying to make this world a happy place and toppling governments. I've been cooped up in a can surrounded by weirdos calling themselves the League of Villains until the television they take orders from finally said to let me out, and only the King in Black knows what's going on with the others. But with all that's happened, I'd say the mission is officially scrubbed. And that means all bets are off. You've had this coming for a long time, Venom. Lasher snarled before one of his tendrils transformed into a large blade that attempted to slice Venom in half, only for the vigilante to dodge out of the way. Okay Venom, you know more about this guy than I do, so what's the plan? Izuku asked from within Venom. As his name implies, Lasher specializes in long-range attacks, but his close-range combat is weaker by comparison, so that's our best chance at taking him down, replied Venom. Got it, Izuku commented as he and Venom weaved between Lasher's bladed tendrils and got in close to deliver a powerful punch that sent Lasher flying. But as this happened, the green symbiote quickly recovered and lashed out once more at Venom, who was sent flying through the air, crashing into a wall. Ow, growled Venom before the sound of a nearby wall getting smashed down reached his ears, and out of the corner of his eye, Venom saw none other than All Might step through and approach Venom. "Need a hand?" he asked the black-clad vigilante as he held out his hand. Venom growled back at the hero. "We can take care of ourselves. But, we dare say your allies could use a bit of help," the black-clad vigilante hissed, pointing in the direction of the Nomu, where the other heroes were still fighting their losing battle. "It seems you're right," said All Might. "After we're done here, you mind hanging around for a bit? We need to talk. About that offer you and the rest of UA want to make us, right?" "Yes, we watch the news, as depressing and irritating as it is," Venom snarled as he pulled himself off his feet. "We don't mind sticking around a bit to talk about that offer, because we have got some things to say about that. But for now, just shut up and get the job done." Before Venom leapt back into the fray, he caught sight of a familiar boy with blonde hair glaring at him. A devious smirk crossed his face as he lumbered toward Bakugo and grinned down at him. "Do us a favor and get your quirk ready," said Venom. Bakugo frowned. "Get my quirk ready for why?" screamed Bakugo as Venom grabbed a hold of him and threw him at Lasher like a lawn dart, only for Lasher to swat the incoming projectile aside, sending Bakugo crashing into a nearby wall, unconscious, and causing Lasher to roar angrily at Venom. It was worth a shot. And it was kinda fun too. Venom laughed with a shrug before charging at Lasher and taking him on in hand-to-hand combat once more as All Might engaged the Nomu in combat. As they watched the battle between the two monsters unfold, Achako turned to Kayaka, the two heroines in training struggling to remain on their own 2 feet from the hard-fought battles they had just partaken in. "You know, maybe we should help him," Achako said to Kayaka. Which one?" asked Kayaka, completely out of breath, her exhaustion making it hard to think. Achako gave her friend a look that clearly said, "Are you kidding me? Help the black one, duh. Blast the crap out of the other one." Right, got it," said Kayaka as she grabbed one of her earphone weapons and aimed it in Lasher's direction. Unfortunately, her exhaustion was making it hard for her to aim accurately. Once she thought she had a decent shot lined up, Kayaka fired a powerful sonic blast before collapsing to the ground. Unfortunately, due to Kayaka's aiming troubles, both Venom and Lasher were caught in the sonic blast. The pain Izuku felt from Kayaka's stray sonic blast was unlike anything he had ever felt. It felt like every atom of his being was being torn apart at the seams. Not even the worst beating that Bakugo had ever given him, a particularly memorable beatdown on the first day of their last year at Aldera Junior High that had put his high pain tolerance through its ultimate test, left him clutching desperately to life. That and it had left him baffled at how his mother hadn't asked any questions. Meanwhile, as he had just finished fighting the Nomu, quickly having realized that while it had shock absorption that didn't translate to shock nullification, All Might caught sight of what happened. His eyes widened at the sight of both Venom and his mysterious green doppelganger writhing in agony, both almost completely incapacitated from young Jiru's misaimed sonic blast. "Sound," All Might whispered to himself. Venom recovered first and leapt at Lasher and knocked him to the floor and started to bash Lasher's head into the ground. He slowly dented the material beneath it with each consecutive punch, only for Lasher's chest to open up and allow Shigaraki's hands land on Venom's chest, making the duo scream in agony as the parts that Shigaraki touched began to crumble and decay, allowing Lasher to retaliate. However, before Lasher could make any further attacks, a voice called out to him, seemingly coming from a swirling black and purple misty void. "Shigaraki. Lasher. The Nomu is down and the hero's reinforcements are here. We need to retreat." Lasher growled in frustration and turned to Venom as the black-clad being began to regenerate the parts of himself that had been decayed. "You and your host may have won this round, Venom, but this fight is far from finished. Watch your backs," Lasher snarled before retreating into the swirling void. The sight made Venom sigh as he pulled himself up to his feet, only to turn around and see All Might and a number of other heroes walking up to him. "So, who was that? Friend of yours?" asked All Might. Venom growled softly. "If he was before, he certainly isn't now. In any case, you said you wanted to talk to us about that offer Nedzu extended on the television, right?" All Might nodded. "You're actually school age, aren't you? Probably the same age as our first years here, correct?" The look Venom gave the hero confirmed his suspicions. "To that end, we're prepared to offer you a transfer from your current high school to UA's hero track and give you a chance to become a legitimate hero rather than just a vigilante. That being said, you'll still need to answer for the vigilante actions you've already done, though not necessarily with jail time. Likely some community service or something along those lines. Do you accept?" Venom looked between the group of gathered heroes, a grin growing on his face before he just started laughing. The heroes just stared at him, glaring at the vigilante before his cackling came to an end as he yelled, "Are you serious? Why on earth would we want to make a mockery of our mission by playing ball with a bunch of hypocrites and liars like you, All Blight? Don't get us wrong, there was once a time where we would have sold our soul for a chance to go to UA and become a hero, but now things are different. Tell us something All Blight, does the name Izuku Midoriya ring any bells? Well, what does young Midoriya have to do with anything? All Might yelped in confusion. He has everything to do with this, snarled Venom. We and him have become quite close these past few weeks. When we met him, the poor kid was barely hanging on by a thread, and even that was starting to unravel. He told us everything that had happened to him, about how he wanted more than anything to become a hero, saving people with a smile like you. He told us about the entrance exam, how Achako your Raka saved him from certain death at the hands of those robots, and about what you said as he was lying crippled in the infirmary. What was it he said you said again? Ah yes. I admire the boy's determination, but he needs to understand that without a practical quirk that he can use to defend himself, he's going to get himself killed. This time, he got lucky, he was in a simulated environment and we were on hand, but if he keeps going like this, eventually that luck is going to run out. He needs to understand that, as hard as reality is, not all of us can be heroes. The truth is that while it's not bad to dream, you also have to consider what's realistic. The students and staff there all went wide-eyed, most glancing back at All Might in disbelief. He had really said that within earshot of a quirkless teenager who not only looked up to him, but had been crippled in pursuit of his dream of becoming a hero like the man he admired. However, Venom was far from finished. And yet, look at Eraserhead. His quirk does jack shit against villains with mutant quirks, and even then he uses his capture scarf to detain villains. Heck, he has to wear them down first by fighting them quirkless. Look at. Venom pointed to what looked like a bunch of floating clothes, the invisible girl, whose name escapes us. All she seems to be able to do is turn invisible. Actually, I can refract energy beams to the aforementioned invisible girl chimed in. And my name is Hagakure. Good to know, Venom grumbled, heavy sarcasm in his tone. Our point is, so many heroes, past, present and likely future, are heroes and yet do not have combat-based quirks and are forced to resort to hand-to-hand combat and gadgets. So, why exactly couldn't Izuku Midoriya be a hero without a quirk? What makes him not worth the time and effort to have him undergo physical conditioning and have him train in hand-to-hand combat? He's actually pretty intelligent too, so he could easily come up with support devices to supplement himself in combat. The hypocrisy you possess is astounding, All Blight. So, you can take your offer and shove it up your ass. Joining the ranks of hypocrites like you would make a mockery of everything we've worked for, everything we stand for. And if the world chooses to become our enemy, then we will fight as we always have. We are done lying down and rolling over for people who think they're better than everyone just because they have more power than those weaker than them. And with that, Venom disappeared into thin air. As members of the UA staff confronted All Might about what he said to Izuku Midoriya, Achako looked on, her mind racing a mile a minute. She couldn't help but feel as though there was something familiar about Venom. Something that made her feel sad. And hurt. Moreover, she couldn't stop thinking about everything Izuku had been through. She knew that Izuku hadn't been fond of All Might ever since what happened at the entrance exam, but she just didn't know the exact details as to why. And now that she did know, she was having a few particular regrets. Maybe agreeing to become All Might's successor was a mistake. Achako thought as her right arm crackled with pink electrical discharges. Downtown Mustafu, some time later. Ducking into an alleyway, Venom became visible and reverted back into a very unhappy-looking Izuku, clad in his black suit. Venom, get out here. Now. We need to talk, said Izuku as a tendril with Venom's face emerged from Izuku's back. When exactly were you going to tell me that there were other Clinters here on Earth besides you? Venom reluctantly sighed. In truth, I was hoping to avoid that conversation, the symbiote admitted. The truth is, Lasher and myself were part of what you might call a special forces unit. We were sent here by our leader to investigate the disappearance of one of our own, a Clinter by the name of Sleeper, who suddenly disappeared from the hive mind. The signal Sleeper sent out is a lot like a wireless signal, with Earth being just far enough outside its range. As a result, my team and I lost control of the meteor we were traveling on when we disconnected from the hive mind, which broke apart in the upper atmosphere, explained Venom as his tone started to change. Until I saw Lasher, I was certain I was the only survivor, but now I'm not so sure. And to make matters worse, me and one other symbiote were the only ones out of my entire team who had even an ounce of benevolence in them, and all of us are cold, brutal, vicious killing machines who have filled entire necropolises single-handed. Lasher being bonded to a villain, particularly one as maladjusted as the Shigaraki guy, is a massacre waiting to happen, though I suppose it could be worse. The League could have had a red Clinter on their team. Alright. How worried should I be about the other symbiotes running around and slaughtering everything that moves? Hard to say, replied Venom. If we're lucky, Lasher and myself are the only ones who survived re-entry, or the rest of my team are in the hands of the heroes. And if we're not lucky? Then there are 5 of us out there, 6 including me. Lasher has already fallen into the hands of a villain, and we don't need Phage, Agony, Shirak, or God forbid Riot to fall into the wrong hands. Then again, knowing Riot, we also don't want anyone to fall into his hands. Okay, who's Riot and why is he a God forbid scenario? Venom sighed at this. Simply put, Riot is my boss. The leader of my team. Silver Clinters are among the most powerful of my kind. They have got shit you've never seen, and he is not a symbiote you want bonded to someone in power. Tokyo streets later that night. Clad in an overcoat that had a hood pulled up over her head to hide her face, the deposed president of the Hero Public Safety Commission, Hinata Haruno, got out of her car and made her way down the street. The past 24 hours had been nothing short of devastating for her. She'd lost everything save for her home, the money she had in her own name, which was quite a substantial amount, and her personal belongings. Well, except all her computers, files, everything else. That was gone. And she had a horrible feeling that things were going to get even worse. Excuse me. Are you Hinata Haruno, president of the HPSC? A young-sounding voice asked from what sounded like a nearby alleyway. Hinata turned to the voice, only to see it was a little boy that seemed to be elementary school age, covered in dirt and ragged clothing, and looked particularly skittish. Slowly and carefully, Hinata approached the boy and got down on her knees to speak with him. Are you okay? Are you lost? She asked the boy. Faster than blinking, the boy had his hand wrapped tight around Hinata's throat as a gray sludge emerged from his body and seeped into Hinata's. A split second later, as her vision began to go dark, Hinata heard a sinister voice speak inside her head. Oh, I'm fine, thanks for asking. And no, I'm not lost. But maybe you can help me find some folks who are. Island containment cells. Melissa Shield, a young woman with shoulder-length curly blonde hair and glasses, was wearing a white lab coat, white shirt with a pinkish vest, and a red bow tie, tan pants, and brown boots, was making her way down the hall. A friend of hers, Rachel Goodman, an aspiring researcher with a quirk that allowed her to emit a sonic shriek capable of shattering plexiglass and rupturing eardrums, had gone on a rampage. The chaos that followed caused a number of injuries and a considerable amount of property damage before finally being taken down, though not without considerable effort. Needless to say, Melissa was curious as to what happened to her friend to make her go on a rampage. It also didn't help that there were reports that she had taken a form that resembled a female version of the vigilante in Mustafu, who was currently making quite a splash all across Japan, but with a different color scheme, a pale almost corpse-like gray in addition to the black, with some kind of large tendril at the top of the head, akin to a head full of long hair. If what she'd heard her father say to his team was accurate. It wasn't long before Melissa was standing in front of Rachel's cell and found her friend curled into a ball in the corner, something that felt wrong on a whole number of levels. Rach, are you okay? Do you want to talk about what happened? Melissa quietly asked. Faster than blinking, Rachel bolted from her corner and was at the cell door, causing Melissa to tumble back in fright with a small scream. You are a much better fit than Rachel. Rachel said in a completely different voice. You're not Rachel. Who or what are you? Melissa asked, causing Rachel to beam at her. Intelligent too. I do love intelligent hosts. And chocolate. The thing posing as Rachel giggled. Best thing humans, as I understand your species to be called, have ever invented. Oh, Melissa. That is your name, right? Melissa Shield. When I get out of here, and sooner or later, I will. You and I are gonna make some boys Shirek. Landing firmly on a rooftop as he made his way through the city, the teenage boy within the monster's form of Venom was once again lost in his thoughts. He was trying to formulate a plan for how to ruin Aldera and his arch-enemy Kitsuki Bakugo, something he had delayed due to recent circumstances, but knew he could do it now. When he had scoped out the school earlier that evening, he noticed that there seemed to be a number of people whom Izuku recognized as lesser-known heroes, or as they were more commonly known, underground heroes, patrolling the area around the school. The sight was slightly irritating, especially since he saw that it was none other than Eraserhead doing the patrol. Not only that, the sight of the hero meant that, just as she told him several days ago when he met with her and her friends, Achako had told Nedzu about what had happened to him in the past and that he really did believe her, which in turn meant that the principal had a hand in the underground heroes patrolling the area around Aldera. Both Venom and Izuku couldn't help but sigh. How could someone with an intelligence-boosting quirk be so stupid? They weren't gonna find anything going on at Aldera at night, their injustices occurred in broad daylight within their very halls. That is, unless they were looking for something else. Izuku had seen a rumor online about Aldera potentially having ties to a quirkist villain organization that supposedly had ties to Detonate Communications, but there was nothing to indicate any such organization had those ties. Although, if that were the case, then it would certainly explain the way Bakugo and his friends treated him and Anoichi. However, the one thing that made him believe such connections to be false was that Ichi had become the school pariah after his quirk awakened. If Aldair really was tied to this supposed villain organization, then that wouldn't have happened. Instead, Ichi would have received much more favorable treatment from the faculty and students and could have very well betrayed him like Bakugo had. Izuku shuddered to think what would have happened to him in such a scenario. Maybe he would have taken a swan dive off the school roof as Bakugo had told him to. Venom shook his head as he continued swinging through the air. It was no use thinking in hypotheticals, as that never happened in reality. Regardless, the presence of underground heroes, including Eraserhead, could be useful in his plans to bring Aldera Junior High crumbling down. Well, that and knocking Bakugo down a few dozen pegs and getting justice for Inoichi. And as he did this, Venom's symbiote sense went off, causing him to glance around, only for someone's foot to slam into him. He let out a yelp as he was knocked out of the sky, sending him tumbling onto a nearby rooftop. Well, at least we weren't outright blasted out of the sky, this time Venom grumbled as he started to recover, only to glance up and see his attacker. It was a woman who seemed to have a rabbit mutant quirk and was clad in a white and black outfit. I gotta admit, I was worried that someone would take you down before I got a chance to have a crack at you, the hero Maruko laughed. Even better, it's good to know that you're just a vigilante and not a flat-out villain like the HPSC made you out to be. Yeah, well, what else would you expect from an organization that has fostered a broken system that has allowed the suicides and deaths of people whose only crime was losing the genetic jackpot? Venom snarled as he fired a tendril, smacking Maruko off him as he fully stood up, only for the rabbit-quirked woman to do a backflip and land firmly on her feet. Yeah, I've heard about your rhetoric. You say you're fighting to change the world and give hope to the people who have been shit on all their lives. You know, you could have just become an actual hero and done all that from the inside. Maruko chuckled as she leapt at Venom again, her feet repeatedly smacking the black-clad creature, only for Venom to just stand and take the blows. You think we didn't try that? Venom snarled as he swiped back at the hero, who all but danced aside his attacks. All our life we were beaten, bullied, and punished for the innocent sin of not having any powers, yet still daring to reach for the impossible by becoming a hero. And yet all we had to show for our efforts was a broken body, broken dreams, betrayal, and fallen idols. And that was before we found out just how corrupt hero society really was when we were trying to clear our name. Venom let out a roar next as he turned his hand into a mace, swinging it straight for the rabbit hero. In response, the heroine backflipped out of the way, only to grab something and throw it at the giant black beast. This is the only path left for us. The path that lets us become the hero we always thought existed before we learned the truth, not some egomaniacal sellout like Olmi Erg. Loud. Venom screamed as the object detonated, releasing a powerful sonic burst that sounded like chiming bells as it deployed 3 miniature versions of the same device. In pure agony, Venom stumbled and fell, dropping to his hands and knees. Yeah. Funny you mention All Might. Maruko continued to chuckle. He was nice enough to let the heroes whose lives you didn't ruin in on your Achilles' heel. One chat with the right support company later and we got ourselves some sonic pulse grenades. As she pulled out another sonic grenade, grinning at the sight of the suffering Venom, she continued to speak. You know. They say you shouldn't ask for whom the bell tolls because it tolls for thee. Am I using that quote right? Who cares, I'm rolling with it. She then kicked the device over. Only for a bullet to suddenly pierce and destroy it, making her flinch. 1 second later, Maruko felt something sting her neck, causing her to pull it out, only to go wide-eyed as she saw it was a tranquilizer dart. Wah. She tried to say before falling to her knees, instantly losing consciousness. And as Venom pulled himself together from the unexpected barrage of sound, a new female voice rang out in the night. Well, that's got her out from under our feet. You okay there, big guy? Venom looked up at this, growling and groaning as he tried to stand, before looking up at the newcomer. It was a woman with purple hair, pale skin, and a purple and black outfit that reminded Izuku of a character created by an incredibly ancient comic book company called Detective Comics, or DC for short. Rachel Roth, hero name Raven, was the character the woman called to mind, but considering the fact that her right arm was currently reverting from a tranquilizer gun while the other was shifting from a high-powered sniper rifle, this woman's abilities were very different. Yeah, we're just dandy. Well, we will be once the ringing in our ears stops. Was not expecting All Might to not only figure out our weakness, but spill the beans on what it was. Then again, we suppose he was there at the USJ at the time. The woman raised an eyebrow at this. Why do you hate All Might so much, if you don't mind me asking? The guys back at Tartarus I can get, nearly half the cells, if not more are full thanks to him, but… Venom let out a long growl as he responded, he crushed our hopes. Our dreams. We looked up to him for nearly all our life, aspiring to become a hero like him, saving people with a smile. Anyone can be a hero. he said, only for us to find out the truth from him, that what he'd said was nothing more than PR bullshit, that it's actually only the people with power who can become heroes, and the right powers at that. That is why we hate him and fakes like him. Frauds who care more about the paycheck, fame, glory, and their petty little pissing contest to out-showboat each other than actually protecting the innocent and punishing the wicked, eyes on the men on the clock or not. The woman gave Venom a sympathetic look. I understand where you're coming from, but blaming everything on a minority doesn't help anyone, kid. You want to make the fake stop being around. Then you go after the source, not the symptom. Venom's mask moved as though he were raising an eyebrow. What's the source? You mean the HPSC? Heh, its president is out of a job thanks to us. Yeah, I noticed. Otherwise I'd still be in Tartarus right now, eating prison food. Had you not dethroned the witch, I would have gotten the chance to finish the job and destroy the organization once and for all. Finish the job? Venom asked. The woman turned and looked down at the streets below. My name is Kaina Tsutsumi. I used to be a hero called Lady Nagant in the employ of the HPSC. I was recruited through something called Project Paragon. It was started years ago to create the best heroes possible, but only if they followed the will of the HPSC. Venom hummed in thought. Sounds like an off-the-books program to build minions for the HPSC. Question is, what were they going to be used for? Was this their plan to fill the gap left by All Might when he retired or if he was killed in action, or was it something worse? All things considered, I'd probably go with something worse, replied Nagant. Regardless of the intent, it does not excuse their, shall we say, recruitment methods, nor what they did and likely still are doing to those they recruit, myself included. See, how they recruit for Project Paragon is by taking young children with powerful quirks from their parents. Sometimes they buy them off their parents, sometimes they take them in after their parents are killed in an accident, or an accident if the parents say no. After that, those children are indoctrinated and brainwashed. They essentially lose their souls and effectively become mindless drones of the HPSC, and that's me putting their methods lightly. But every now and again, you get people like me who manage to break free of the brainwashing. I was lucky enough to only be framed by the HPSC and locked up in Tartarus for life without parole. Others, on the other hand, such as those who refused to break and be remolded by the HPSC, were simply disposed of. One and done. Their graves have no markers, and those of them who still have parents alive and looking for them will never be found. Yep, this shady shit needs to be shut down like last decade, and those children the HPSC snatched need to be rescued, ASAP, growled Venom, anger evident in his voice. Though, we can't help but wonder. Why come to us with this information? Something tells us you didn't bring us this tidbit as a thank you for getting you out of Tartarus after being framed for crimes you didn't commit. Nagant nodded. Indeed. I came to you because security around even the least protected of these facilities is incredibly tight, and odds are good that they've only tightened the security after the old witch was dethroned. The HPSC will do almost anything to make sure that Project Paragon, in no uncertain terms, does not exist as far as the world, the rest of the Japanese government included, is concerned. And considering how you were able to dethrone the witch and several corrupt heroes in a single masterstroke, you clearly have a set of skills that would help my mission to bring Project Paragon to light and shut the HPSC down once and for all. We see. Venom hummed, very well, then. We're in. It's time for the world to see just how corrupt the HPSC really is and bring down the organization once and for all. Nagant smiled. Excellent. I happen to know where we can find one of the Project Paragon facilities. Follow me. She said before she leapt from the rooftop onto one nearby, Venom following closely behind. The Mustafu docks a short time later. Venom and Lady Nagant grunted as they landed on a building facing what by all appearances was an abandoned waterfront warehouse. Yet, judging by the way Nagant was glaring at the building, it was likely not as abandoned as it seemed. Venom's suspicions were confirmed when Nagant spoke next. That's the facility. She then pointed at the building. It's probably one of their smaller facilities, but they've likely spared as little expense as possible on their security measures, and it looks like they are using chemotech to hide their presence. Probably appropriated and upgraded from the stuff left behind by those hunter nutjobs. Izuku grimaced from behind Venom's mask. Yeah, he remembered hearing about the hunters. A while back, not long after he'd been diagnosed as quirkless and Bakugo turned his back on him and Ichi, Mustafu had come under siege by a group of individuals known as the Hunters, led by a grizzled old man whose name Izuku couldn't quite remember, who essentially wanted to die with dignity in a glorious last stand. To that end, he and his minions had all but invaded Mustafu to hunt down and butcher heroes and villains alike, all of whom had very powerful quirks. In fact, it was one of the very few times since the dawn of quirks where heroes and villains had no choice but to call a ceasefire and work together to drive them out. In the end, the leader got what he wanted and met his end by the hand of one of the villain's leaders, though who exactly it was kept unusually hush-hush. At this point though, Venom couldn't help but wonder if the HPSC had something to do with that. "So, what's the plan?" asked Venom as he glared at the warehouse. Negan pulled out a small device that pulled up an exterior schematic of the Project Paragon facility that she rotated and tapped to bring up what seemed to be a key point of interest. "First, we'll need to disable the camo field by wrecking the junction box here. I'll have that part covered and keep an eye on the exterior of the facility in case any fully trained paragons or the like decide to come looking for trouble. Then, you'll neutralize the exterior guards, take a keycard off of one of them, and search for an entrance to the facility proper. The warehouse used to be a hideout for a villain cabal way back, and those guys loved their secret passages and hidden lairs. Once inside, you'll need to take out the guards inside, as well as the paragon in charge. This is supposed to be one of the least protected facilities for the project, so you shouldn't have too much trouble." Inside the Project Paragon facility 1 hour later. Venom grunted as a blast of yellow energy fired by a man in a black and yellow exosuit with a pair of robotic appendages that had just fired the aforementioned laser sent him flying into a wall. Getting into the facility itself had been fairly easy once the exterior guard had been taken out. It was a simple matter of searching shipping containers for the right junction box that opened the hidden entrance leading into the facility. After that, however, good God, King in Black, and any other deities in existence, moving through the facility was anything but easy. Between guards that had quirks that would have made the Deku he used to be making a lake with his drool, floors that had moving safe areas to walk, laser guns, sonic pulse guns, and every other villain's lair trap and tactic in the book. Venom had finally arrived at the containment cells, where the kids were supposedly being held. And where the asshole he was currently fighting had been waiting for him. "Shouldn't have too much trouble," she says as Izuku snarked inside his head before Venom launched his fist in a biomass and struck the man, apparently called Buzzkill by his subordinates. The attack struck Buzzkill in the chest, sending him stumbling back before he regained his footing and launched himself at Venom using his organic wings with an energy-charged fist. Venom then ducked under the strike, causing the thug to punch a hole in the wall directly behind Venom, making him stuck. "Now we can do some real damage," thought Izuku, and Venom as one before the symbol of vengeance charged, one of his hands turning into his mace as scored a solid hit on Buzzkill, knocking his helmet off of the man. Both Izuku and Venom grimaced as they saw Buzzkill's face. It was all too clear that the man had a wasp mutant quirk, a yellow jacket wasp if Izuku's bug knowledge was accurate. But at the same time, Izuku saw what Lady Nagant had been talking about. There was no light in Buzzkill's insect-like eyes. Only a dark and empty void, and what human features he had displayed no sign of any form of emotion. And that more than anything strengthened Izuku's resolve to shut down all this insanity. "You know, you looked better with the mask on," Venom growled before he punched Buzzkill in the face, knocking him out cold with his hand still stuck in the wall. Venom then released a tired sigh before stalking off toward the containment cells where Project Paragon's captives were being held. Hopefully, there would be no more bullshit between getting the kids out of here and leaving the scene. Hopefully. Outside the facility a short time later. As they watched the heroes and police escort the guards, Buzzkill, and the abducted children to a waiting prisoner transport or into the arms of their parents or child services. As this happened, Venom and Lady Nagant watched the scene from a nearby rooftop. "You know, for the first time in a long time, I actually feel satisfied doing hero work," Nagant said with a smile. "You alright?" "Buzzkill's one of Project Paragon's best. We'll live," Venom growled. "More importantly, if this was one of the least protected Project Paragon facilities and we had to go through all that shit, there's no way we can do it alone. We'll need to assemble a team of vigilantes in order to completely destroy it." "Yeah, I suppose you're right," Nagant sighed. "I'll do some searching around and see who I can turn up. I'll find you again when I've got some leads." Venom nodded before leaping into the air and swinging away into the night. Elsewhere. A young man with slick back black hair clad in a black overcoat, a black shirt underneath a black Kevlar vest, black fingerless gloves, black cargo pants, and black combat boots, carrying a bow staff in one hand and a fistful of trading cards in the other, smiled up at what looked like a large burly brute of a creature that looked like a humanoid macaque wearing traditional Japanese clothing underneath various pieces of metal as makeshift armor. In his armor-covered hand was a red metal bow staff with golden ends. Surrounding the two were several unconscious bodies. "Thanks for the help, big guy," the man in the coat said, looking up at the beastman with a friendly smile. Said beastman grunted and nodded. "Name's Jacques LeBleu, but you can call me Gamble. You got a name?" The beastman spoke in a surprisingly high-pitched voice. "The name's Saramariyukim." "Wait, scratch that, reverse it," he said before spinning and pointing at Gamble. "Saram Yukimaru, Sorga or no Nadia, that's what my name is," he said, laughing a monkey's laugh as he leaned on the bow staff. Izuku's apartment complex rooftop 10 p.m. local time. As he made his way onto the rooftop of his apartment complex, Izuku stared into the distance while feeling particularly anxious. 2 days had gone by since he had first entangled himself in the nasty business that was Project Paragon, and in that time, Izuku discovered that someone was keeping tabs on him. Not on Venom, but Izuku Midoriya. On more than one occasion, Izuku had found himself being tailed by what he quickly recognized as an off-duty hero. He noticed this due to having an alien symbiote bonded to himself, allowing him literally have eyes in the back of his head. With Venom tipping him off, and with a little shapeshifting, Izuku had been able to lose his stalkers rather easily. Still, Izuku had to wonder if they were onto his double life. And if they were, who had asked them to keep tabs on him? Was it a high-ranked pro-hero, or was it someone else? Izuku frowned at that thought. He still hadn't found Overhaul, which made him think that the heroes tailing him could be working for Overhaul like Electrus and Gremlin. That didn't feel quite right. If Overhaul, or anyone from the 8 precepts as Izuku's research had revealed Overhaul's crew to be called, were keeping tabs on him, they would have done something by now. Mainly in the category of trying to kill him in his sleep or something. No, it had to be another pro, but who? All Might. Izuku snorted at the thought. The number 1 hero had better things to do with his time than have some pals follow some reject of society around on a guess. No, it had to be someone else. But who? It didn't matter. At least, not tonight that is. Not when he had worked out a plan to at long last destroy Aldera Junior High. The plan would destroy the school, the heroes and police investigators in their pocket, and most importantly of all, Katsuki Bakugo, the explosive asshole he'd once been foolish enough to call his friend. Izuku's fists clenched at the thought. Bakugo was no hero, just a supervillain waiting to happen. A punk deluding himself into thinking he was hero material because of how flashy and powerful his quirk was. And as long as Izuku and Venom drew breath, he would see to it that Bakugo would never get the chance to go pro and become another Endeavor. After all, if Bakugo became a hero, Izuku knew that the first thing Bakugo would do would be him abusing his power and never facing the consequences of his actions. Izuku shook his head. Now wasn't the time to get lost in his rage-filled thoughts. Not when it was time to put the plan he and Venom had devised into action at long last. "Ready, partner?" Izuku asked the Clinter before the symbiote formed over him into the familiar form of Venom. "Always," Venom replied before leaping off the building, soon swinging toward the general vicinity of Aldera Middle School. The sight made Izuku smile inside the symbiote. By the time the sun rose, Aldera and Katsuki Bakugo would have fallen, Venom would make sure of it. As would one other piece of the puzzle that the vigilante needed to get onto the board. Near Aldera Junior High 11:30 p.m. local time. Shouda's Awa, aka Racerhead, was currently on patrol outside the Aldera Junior High School building, per the request of the boss of his day job, Nedzu. The principal had been tipped off about there being some dirty dealings going on at the school, and in all honesty, he didn't know why anyone would do anything unscrupulous at a middle school of all places. However, as he thought about it, he was pretty sure this was where that Bakugo boy had attended. Truth be told, something didn't sit well with him about Katsuki Bakugo getting into UA High School. For one thing, he had an incredibly overinflated opinion of himself, but apart from that, his personality was simply not suited for a hero, and his quirk was questionably suited for hero work at best. Although, after he had an altercation with the boy who had dropped off that sweet little girl Eri, he had seemed troubled somehow. Not only that, when that idiot All Might tried to fight the new vigilante, only to retreat, he seemed further troubled. However, he doubted that he'd get the boy to open up about what was troubling him with that stubborn pride and temper of his being just as explosive as his quirk. Eraserhead was then pulled out of his thoughts when a sinister voice rang out in the night, "Nice night, isn't it, Teach?" Eraserhead spun around, only to see Venom leaning against the wall of a nearby building, a mischievous grin on his face as he looked at the underground pro-hero. The hero quickly used his quirk to disable the vigilante's quirk, only for Venom to let out a cackle. "Don't bother, Teach. Your quirk is powerless against us." Eraserhead went wide-eyed at this, making Venom laugh even more. "Oh yeah, we know all about you, Mr. Underground Pro-Hero Eraserhead. You have the ability to disable the quirks of your enemies, rendering them powerless against you. Good trick for a schoolteacher to know. Unfortunately for you, however, our powers come from a much older rule of nature, from before the dawn of quirks. In other words, even with your quirk, to us, you're just a little man." Eraserhead growled at this. "What's that supposed to mean?" Venom's grin grew wider. "If you wanna know, you're gonna have to catch us." The monstrous being cackled before leaping into the air and started swinging again, Eraserhead now in hot pursuit after him. Venom grinned at the side as he continued to swing around. All according to plan. 45 minutes later. Eraserhead was getting out of breath from his pursuit of the vigilante. He hadn't had to work this hard to catch a target in a long time. Worse, it seemed like the vigilante was right, as erasure had no effect on him. That meant his tremendous power wasn't from a quirk, which was really worrying. But not as worrying as his current problem. He'd just lost track of Venom. Eraserhead frowned at this, growling as he came to a stop. Questions now filled his head. Had all of that been just for the sake of it? Nothing more than a game to the vigilante. No, somehow that didn't feel right. From what he saw of the fight between All Might and Venom, and from the meeting he and his fellow UA faculty members had had prior to the mess at the USJ, Venom had a keen analytical mind underneath his monstrous appearance. That meant Venom was planning something and had intended to bait the underground pro into getting into position. Question was, what was the black-clad vigilante up to? Meanwhile, with said vigilante, Venom was standing on the rooftop of Aldera Middle School, looking over the edge. In another time, another life, Izuku could have very well taken Bakugo's advice and taken a swan dive off the roof and been reunited with his best friend, Inoichi. Truth be told, he had a hard time seeing this hellhole of a school wiggling their way out of that scenario. But they probably would have. Whoever investigated his death would probably decide to half-ass it, or Aldera would manage to pay off the investigators, like they had with Ichi, and who knows who else over the years this bullshit has been going on. However, not only was he made of tougher stuff than that, Izuku now had a new purpose to live for as Venom. To show this world just how twisted and corrupt the society they so dearly valued had become. The so-called rejects, comprised of those without powers or weak abilities, and those cursed with evil powers who were treated like dirt and even hated for the simple fact of just being alive, would still be beaten by this society. And while that happened, those with showy and flashy powers, even the absolute monsters of human beings, were worshipped like gods and became fabulously wealthy. It was a status quo that needed to be shaken up and set right. And now, it was time for Venom to begin making some further steps to that goal, as well as begin correcting a few wrongs in his own life in the process. As such, Venom jumped off the building and shot a web upward to the side of the building and swung through a window, demolishing a part of the wall in the process as he landed inside. Take a swan dive off the roof. Thanks for the advice, Kachin. Or rather, what's left of you inside that monster you've become, because of your quirk, Venom snarled. Now then. We have a score to settle with this corrupt trash hole of a school. Let's see. If we were a crooked school principal hiding evidence of bribery, illegal modification of records, discrimination against the quirkless, and a severe bullying problem that resulted in at least one student taking their own life, where would we hide the evidence? Suppose we could check the office. Doubt it's there, but it never hurts to check. And in the meantime, suppose we can make a little mess. And as Venom began making his way toward the main office, trashing everything in his path along the way, Izuku began to think. A couple weeks ago at this time, he couldn't even begin to imagine doing something like this, destroying the place that had been the closest thing to hell with his bare hands. Not only that, he was about to finally get revenge on Katsuki Bakugo, who he'd once called his best friend, who he tried to stay friends with against his better judgment and constant beatings. And it was all thanks to Venom. Because of him, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a broken shell or a miserable failure. He finally felt like himself again. You're welcome, partner, Venom said to his host, causing Izuku to smile. That said, I still say that we should kick the crap out of Bomber Boy. Oh, don't worry about that. If he finds out our part in all this, I'm sure we'll get that chance, Izuku replied. Assholes fueled by nothing but rage, ego, and self-entitlement like him are so easy to predict, and I predict that if he finds out that we were responsible for the sudden turn his life is about to take, he'll be gunning for us with all the subtlety and nuance of a napalm bomb. And then we break him like a toothpick, Venom hissed as he arrived at the main office and smashed down the door, almost immediately catching sight of the safe inside. Bingo, Izuku and Venom growled before tearing off the safe door, easily finding the contents he sought inside. Ledgers with payments going directly into the accounts of several notable investigative heroes, the genuine copies of his and Bakugo's records prior to Aldera switching them, as well as those of several other students, including those of Inoichi, among several other pieces of incriminating evidence. And now, to bring in the proper authorities. 2 hours later. Shouda had been searching the area around Aldera Junior High before he received a wad of black webbing in his face. Growling at this, the underground pro quickly ripped off the offending goop before giving chase to the perpetrator. Venom chuckled as he led the hobo-looking hero toward Aldera. You suck at hide and seek, you know that. Venom taunted as he saw Aldera come into view. Well, you certainly aren't making it easy for me. Eraserhead complained to the black and white being. Well, maybe you just rely too much on your quirk to give yourself an edge. Maybe you should work more on improving your physical capabilities rather than using your powers as a crutch, Venom replied as he landed on Aldera's rooftop. Catch us if you can, pencil topper. Venom then charged into Aldera, or at least it looked like he did. That was enough for Shouta Izawa as he entered the building through the front door. Inside, he found various webs and scratches on the walls, ceiling, and floor as he searched. And as he saw this, he saw a pattern of the webs and scratches, each forming arrows. Running as fast as he could, the hero followed each arrow, hoping he wasn't being led into a trap. That is, till he arrived at the principal's office for the school, where in the center of the now dilapidated room was a large black web with the words "Well. Take it, dum-dum" written over it and a final arrow pointing to the center of the web where a large web pouch was hanging. Cautiously, Eraserhead removed the web pouch from the wall and opened it, only to go wide-eyed before slowly smiling as he browsed the contents. Izawa may not agree with the gratuitous and oftentimes brutal violence that Venom unleashed when the black-clad vigilante was on patrol and stopping street crimes. But when it came to exposing the wrongdoings that he and his colleagues had allowed to go unnoticed, Izawa certainly couldn't argue with, nor help but be impressed with, his results. Not only that, considering where Izawa was right now, Aldera Junior High, he found new insight as to who could possibly be inside that suit, narrowing down the list of potential candidates. For his part, Izawa knew exactly what Venom was, even if he didn't know who exactly was wearing the suit. That is, what he was apart from being a brutal near-lethal protector of a vigilante. Bravo, problem child. Bravo. Eraserhead muttered to himself. UA High School, the following afternoon. Being his default emotional state, Katsuki Bakugo being angry was nothing new to those around him. Today though? He was beyond furious. How? How the hell was all of this happening to him? He was supposed to become the greatest hero who had ever lived. Women, wealth, power, everything he ever wanted, all his. And yet, it had all come unraveled for him faster than blinking. First, it had started when the entirety of Class 1A, including Kirishima whom he'd actually started to become friends with, all of a sudden started treating him like he was complete and utter villain scum. Alright, whatever, he didn't need a bunch of extras like them hanging around. He was the hero of this story after all, heck the main character of the entire world, damn it. They'd be lucky to make a C-list hero sidekick, well he would be worshipped as the greatest SSS list hero ever. And all had been well for a while, only with a few hiccups. Mainly the freak in black who may or may not be stupid delusional Deku somehow using him as a grenade notwithstanding. Until today, that is. Somehow, UA had unearthed his extensive history of bullying and violent tendencies that Aldera had apparently covered up. And as a result of this deception, Katsuki Bakugo had not only been kicked out of the hero course and stuck in the general studies track, but his parents had given him a vicious tongue lashing about how he'd treated Deku. Katsuki let out a roar of anger and punched a nearby locker. How? How could this have happened? How could his destiny have been stolen from him like this? One thing was certain though. When he found out who was behind all this, there would be nothing but ashes left. Meanwhile, across the street from Aldera Junior High. Call me crazy, but I have a hunch that the evidence Nezu needs will turn up before long. Ichako remembered what Izuku had told her and her friends at the diner a while back. And lo and behold, almost a month later, Venom had exposed the wrongdoings going on at Aldera, causing Bakugo to get the boot from the hero course, much to her and her classmates' joy. There was also the immediate blacklisting of Aldera's entire faculty and the immediate arrest of several investigative pro-heroes, plus the annihilation of their hero agencies. Taken together, it was fairly easy for a suspicion to sneak its way into Ichako's mind about who might possibly be underneath Venom's terrifying visage. And that suspicion made her heart hurt even more for Izuku Midoriya. All Might had informed her about All For One and his hunch that he was pulling the League of Villains strings. Those facts alone had an undeniable similarity between Venom and that green creature Lasher, if Ichako remembered correctly. That made a new question appear in her head. Could Izuku, in his pain and despair, have made a deal with the devil that was All For One in exchange for the power to become Venom? Either way, she needed solid evidence if she was to confirm her theory that it was Izuku behind Venom's mask. That meant she had to get closer to Izuku. Also, she could use someone of Izuku's particular expertise to help her figure her way through some of the new developments that her recently attained power from All Might had undergone, hopefully before the sports festival in a couple weeks. 2 birds, 1 stone. Ichako smiled brightly as she saw Izuku a few minutes later, a satisfied smile on his face as he leaned on his cane. He was clad in a very stylish black outfit, watching the police as they continued to tear Aldera apart, bringing box upon box out of the building. This has got to feel very satisfying after the crap that Aldera has put you through, Ichako commented, catching Izuku's attention. Izuku smiled as he limped up to Ichako. Like you would not believe. I don't know if I ever told you this, but my mom's actually a lawyer and she's putting together a class action lawsuit that will leave Aldera and its faculty penniless and the victims, myself included, very happy. Personally though, I just hope that Ichi can finally rest in peace. He shined a big grin at her before asking, but what about you? You look troubled. What's wrong? Ochako nervously rubbed the back of her neck in response. I need your help with something, but I can't talk about it here. You know, in public, as this is kinda on a need-to-know basis. Do you have somewhere we can talk? Sorry about the mess, Izuku said as he led Ochako into his apartment. I don't usually have company. Ever, actually. Besides, my mother says all brilliant men and women are slobs in some way. Ochako glanced around the room, seeing it was something of a disaster area, almost like her own room was back at her new dormitory back at UA. Also, there was a curious smell in the air, making her ask, what's that smell? Ah damn, I forgot I had that going, Izuku sighed as he limped into the small den in his apartment with Ochako following. A second later, Izuku stopped at a small desk with a chemistry set, an experiment seemingly in progress before Izuku placed a cork on a vial that held a white substance of some kind. Sorry about that. Chemistry assignment for school. After sealing the substance, Izuku spun around with a small smile on his face before returning to the living room. And as he did this, Ochako lingered for a moment, glancing down to see one of the notebooks lying open on the desk. While she might not be as smart or studious as Izuku, Iida or Momo, what she could tell by looking at the formula in the notebook, it looked to be notes on an adhesive fluid. That, and there were notes on how to make it more heat resistant or even carry an electrical charge, effectively making the fluid like a sticky taser. Something tells me this isn't a school assignment. Ochako thought, only to be pulled out of her thoughts by Izuku's voice in the living room. So what's this important thing you needed to talk to me about? The green-haired boy slightly exclaimed as Ochako spun around and walked into the room, soon sitting down on the couch next to Izuku. Okay, so first off. Ochako started to say, a flicker of real anxiety and fear in her eyes that made both Izuku and Venom feel equal parts worried and angry. What could have possibly happened to put that flicker of fear in her eyes? And more importantly, was there anyone who had forfeited their ability to walk or eat solid food that needed those privileges revoked? That is, till Ochako took a deep breath, what I'm about to tell you needs to stay between us. If word gets out that you know something about this, you could attract some very dangerous attention. The kind that you or anyone you care about doesn't walk away from without a scar, best case scenario. This isn't the part where you reveal that your parents are actually supervillains wanted by, like, Interpol or something, right? Izuku instantly replied, trying to lighten the mood. And when Ochako suddenly burst out laughing, the teen added, oh no. It's worse, isn't it? Did they bring you into the family business? No, nothing quite that extreme. Ochako giggled before waving her hand, but still, you can kind of consider this UA's version of a government secret. She bit her lip at this next part, taking a deep breath before saying, you see. After the entrance exam. All Might picked me to be the successor of both his mantle and his quirk, one for all. Izuku could almost hear the record scratch sound effect going off in his head as the words left Ochako's mouth. Say what now? Yeah. Ochako grimaced, twiddling her thumbs for a bit as she continued, apparently All Might is actually, technically quirkless, like you. His quirk is like, this super ancient quirk that's been passed down through at least 8 different people, counting All Might. That and it's. Well, it was made with one specific purpose. Defeat the quirk thief, all for one, and bring a permanent end to his evil. Wait, hold on a second, Izuku started waving his hands, you're telling me that there's a quirk that can literally be passed down like a torch? Like, All Might had this quirk, gave it to you, and there's another one that can actually make anyone quirkless. Ochako did a small nod, not just that, but he can give a quirkless person one or even multiple quirks. You know how some people collect stamps, or postcards, or bugs? Well, All for One collected quirks. I say collected because officially he doesn't exist and unofficially, he's dead, killed by All Might in a battle that he had to do everything he could to keep quiet. Izuku didn't like the sound of any of this, and this part made him grimace. There's a but to this, isn't there? Ochako nodded again, yup. With a league of villains popping up, All Might thinks he's alive and is the one pulling the league strings. More importantly, All for One has his eye on the One for All quirk. It's kin to his white whale, so to speak, and he's killed countless people in pursuit of it. I don't know if he knows that I have it now, but life is going to get a lot more complicated for me once he does find out. I see. Izuku whispered and crossed his arms before frowning, and who gave All Might this quirk in the first place? The heroine from well before our time and before All Might's reign as the symbol of peace. His own mentor of sorts named Nana Shimura. Izuku closed his eyes, the teen processing the information he'd just been given. So let me see if I got this right. Izuku muttered as a dark look appeared in his eyes, the teen slowly getting up and making his way over to the sink, giving off an aura that made Ochako slightly shiver. All Might was quirkless, like me, and then some lady took pity on him and gave him a quirk. A quirk that can be bestowed on people, allowing him to become the symbol of peace, get rich, and become the #1 hero in Japan. And this all for one guy who has the ability to give and take quirks from people who even the symbol of peace couldn't put down for good is likely the guy running the League of Villains and will stop at nothing to get his hands on that quirk. But she passed down to you, painting a massive target on your back. Izuku ranted out in almost one breath as he glanced back at Ochako. Pretty much, yeah, Ochako shrugged. If this all for one is running the league, then that means he's the television Lasher mentioned, and that means he's Lasher's and his host's boss. Venom commented in Izuku's mind. We should try to track him down and see if he has anyone else. All in good time, buddy, Izuku quietly muttered with a hand pinching his nose to make it look like he was frustrated before he spoke up. Maybe I should have a talk with this all for one guy and see if I can strike a bargain with him, see if I can get him to give me a quirk. Who knows, with heroes being such a disappointment recently, maybe I can find a villain who actually believes in me. Izuku said in the most sarcastic tone possible before shaking his head. His words made Ochako flinch, only to see the teen chuckle and give her a small smile. Hey, don't worry about it. Making a deal with a devil like this quirk thief and becoming a villain isn't my style. I mean, if things had played out worse, then it might have been my style. But it's no use thinking in hypotheticals. Things didn't pan out like that in reality. Plus, I think my mom would be so disappointed in me if I turned out evil, to say nothing of what my closest and dearest friend would think, especially now that I know she can kick my ass worse than Bakugo ever could. Izuku shined the biggest grin at the girl, Ochako soon giving the most massive blush on her face. That is, till Izuku showed her an inquisitive frown, but one thing I'm wondering. Why are you telling me all this? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm ecstatic that you trust me enough to tell me a secret that big, but why tell me all this? Well, for a couple of reasons, actually, Ochako replied, her expression turning grim. The first and biggest one being that One for All seems to have undergone some kind of awakening where it's manifesting the quirks of the other 8 bears. I was hoping that, given your talents for quirk analysis, that you might be able to help me figure things out with what's going on. And help me with these new abilities, ideally before the sports festival in a couple weeks. Izuku smiled and slowly made his way back to the couch, say no more. You've come to the right man for the job, Ochako. He came to a stop right before sitting down, so, what's the other reason? Ochako sighed and glanced away. Well, it's just that. I remembered what you said back at that diner when I introduced you to Momo, Sayu, and Mina about how you said that Nedzu would soon have the evidence he needed to destroy Aldera. A month later, Venom attacks Aldera and gets my homeroom teacher the evidence to wipe Aldera off the map. Then there was what Venom said to All Might at the USJ, plus the fact that that Lasher creature that works for the League looks a lot like Venom. She looked back at Izuku, it's starting to paint a picture. Uh-oh. I think we might be in trouble, Izuku. Venom whispered from within Izuku's mind. And what picture is that, exactly? Izuku shakily asked back. She showed him a distinct confident glare. Simply put, I think you're Venom. And I think you got that power from All for One. Oh crap, she's figured it out, Venom hissed, a hint of panic in his voice. Never mind the fact that her reasoning is completely off the mark, the fact remains that she knows who we are. Just say the word and we're out of here, partner, no questions asked. Izuku had to do something to throw her off him, so he acted incredulous. You think I'm Venom? I mean, yeah, I make some of his equipment, but… Izuku quickly snapped his hand over his mouth as if he'd let out something he shouldn't. Ochako gave Izuku a deadpan expression. You know, that's as good as telling me that it's you, Izuku. Izuku glanced away, only to sigh in defeat. Alright. You got me. I suppose since you trusted me with your big secret, I guess I'll trust you with mine. But, you gotta promise me one thing. This stays between you, me, and Venom. No telling your friends about it, and especially no telling the heroes. I got enough problems without them hounding me about this. Ochako closed her eyes for a second, only to reopen them and said, Alright Izuku, I promise on my future as a hero, and my status as the 9th user of One for All, that I won't share your secret with anyone, no matter what. She crossed her arms and slightly tilted her head, but one thing I gotta ask. Why are you talking about Venom like he's a completely different person? Izuku chuckled at the question before saying, well partner, care to shed a little light on the subject? Ochako watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as an inky black tendril emerged from Izuku's back, the end of which slowly morphed into a face that Ochako immediately recognized as Venom's. Why, hello there, Ochako. It's so nice to finally meet you face to face. Venom laughed with his signature grin. Izuku? What in God's name is that thing? Some kind of parasite? Ochako squeaked out. Okay lady, first off, I am not a thing. I am a living creature with thoughts and feelings of my own. Honestly, some of my people would bite your head off for that alone. Secondly, parasite. Venom angrily snarled, causing Ochako to recoil in fear. Venom, calm down. We need her to like us. Izuku panically said before waving his hands, yeah, sorry about that Ochako. The Clinters really don't like it when you treat them as weapons or anything less than a living being with its own thoughts and feelings. Also, whatever you do not call one the P-word. Right. Got it. Said Ochako, a look of terror on her face. Izuku. Please start explaining what is going on here before I run out of here screaming for every hero I can find to get the sludge creature away from you by any means necessary. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. Right. Well, I guess this all started when I found a meteorite piece on Dagaba Beach and brought it home with me as a souvenir. Ochako raised an eyebrow at that, only to go wide-eyed as he continued to talk. All Might's classroom, around the same time. Yoshinori Yagi sat in his office chair, staring at the wall as mulled over what the past week or so had been like for him. After the USJ incident, most of his students had been glaring at him with disappointed scowls, much like the staff as well, not long after they gave him a thorough dressing down about what he'd said about young Midoriya. The worst was young Uraraka, and that hurt the most out of all the lectures he'd gotten that day. Shortly after the USJ incident, Ochako Uraraka glared daggers at her mentor, pink electricity sparking off her fists and forearms. Really, Toshinori-san? Really? After everything you told me about yourself, about how you yourself were quirkless until Nana Shimura took you under her wing, you actually mouth off about being realistic to someone who's just like you? What the hell is wrong with you? Ochako's anger and frustration flowed off of her at this, the man feeling like he was staring at a mighty tempest. The sight made him try to show he was ashamed of himself for what he'd said to the boy. However, Ochako was far from finished giving her mentor an earful. Do you know how much pain and suffering Izuku has had to go through because of people like you and Bakugo? Having to watch his only friend fall apart and finally kill himself, despite everything he tried to do to support him. Having to be beaten by that explosive piece of shit for 10 years straight just because he doesn't have some flashy superpower. And his middle school letting said piece of shit get away with it. All Might shrunk as she continued to screech, only for Ochako to take a few deep breaths to steady herself before adding, if you really think you can't be a hero without a quirk, then you should have given one for all to Izuku Midoriya instead of me, busted leg be damned. I'm sure the support department could have cooked something up to help with that for hero work, and I could have gotten by just fine with zero gravity. Izuku, on the other hand, I'm not sure what's still holding him together, but he's far stronger than anyone I've ever met, you included. Present day. Yoshinori let out a tired sigh. Young Uraraka was right. The rest of the staff was right. He was honestly the biggest hypocrite imaginable. Maybe it was because back in his youth, the rejects of society weren't quite outcasts, nor were they so heavily discriminated against as he now knew the case to be in this day and age. He let out a long sigh before typing away at his computer. He needed to track down young Midoriya and have a talk with him. Or at the bare minimum, apologize for shattering the boy's faith in heroes and do what he could to make amends for his very poor choice of words. He just hoped that no one else had gotten to him first, especially not him. So yeah, that's my story so far, Izuku commented as he took a drink of hot chocolate, a brooding look on his face. Like the saying goes, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. People aren't likely to wake up out of their apathy without dramatic examples, something I could never do as Izuku Midoriya. Or at least, even if Izuku could do anything, they're still less likely to realize there's a problem, even if it's staring them in the face. Ochako just grimaced at this, only for Izuku to continue ranting, as much as I hate to admit it, All Might was right. You can't be a hero without a quirk or a shitload of money, as you need some kind of power to change the world in the established order. But at the same time, you need to show the world your power and what you can do with it. The grander the scale, the better. So, with Venom's help, I made it so that the people had no choice but to see the evil, hear the evil reverberating on the inside of their skulls, no matter how desperately they try to block it out, and some other third thing involving speaking evil. Izuku chuckled while shaking his head. I mean, sure, Venom and I could go on the warpath, become a villain, and attain absolute power over hero society. But I know my limits. I'm no politician, and I'm certainly not a tyrant. Besides, the more one tightens their grip on something, the more it slips through your fingers. So, by putting the problem on display for all the world to see, those who are actually able to do something about society's corruption have no choice but to do something about it, lest they face the backlash of the masses. But, there's more to it than that, isn't there? Ochako asked as her frown tried to stop growing. Izuku nodded back. Retribution is a big part of it too. Ever since I was diagnosed as quirkless, I've been treated like shit by almost everyone around me, save for Ichi, my mom, you, and your friends. Now that I have the power I've always wanted ever since I was 4 years old, there's a certain part of me that wants to make the people who hurt me hurt just as bad if not worse. I guess that was part of my motivation to take down Aldera. Revenge against them and Bakugo for what they did to me and Ichi. Of course, that same part of me wants to break Bakugo like a goddamn toothpick and leave him to die, but that's just flat out bad, and too. Ochako giggled at the switch between letters and numbers, which made Izuku smile. He'd have to sufficiently piss me off enough, and he hasn't done that. Yet Izuku shined a small grin at this. But, considering what I know about the Bomberanian, Izuku said, causing Ochako's frown to vanish as she burst out laughing. Bomberanian. Ochako giggled. That is the most accurate description of Bakugo I've ever heard. Izuku just shrugged. Well, he is a living bomb, and he has the temperament of a Pomeranian, so, yeah, Bakugo's a Bomberanian. Anyways, we're getting off topic. Point is, once Bakugo figures out I had a hand in his downfall, he's going to come after me with all the fire and fury of an atom bomb. Izuku then turned to Ochako and took her by the hands, and if he does that, there's also a chance he could go the shoot the messenger route and come after you too, since you were the one to tell Nezu about what I told you, and if that happens, then I want you to promise me something. If Bakugo lays so much a fingernail on you, if so much as a molecule of saliva from yelling at the top of his lungs at you heads in your direction, come find me. If Bakugo wants a fight, or if he so much as makes you chip a nail, then Venom and I will give him a fight he'll never forget. Izuku finished, his voice turning slightly more monstrous as he spoke. He'll wish he never came to UA. We won't let him hurt our friends and people we care about. Never again. Ochako felt a small shiver of fear run down her spine at the sudden shift in Izuku's voice. Okay. But only if you promise me something, she replied as she gazed into Izuku's beautiful green eyes and tightened her grip on Izuku's hands. If Venom starts making you do things you don't want to do or starts taking things too far, please come find me. I'll get the heroes and help them get him off of you. I'm happy you found someone who can help you fight for a noble cause, but not if it comes at the cost of that wonderful, beautiful soul of yours. She does know I can hear her, right? Venom grumbled within Izuku's mind. It's the thought that counts, Venom, Izuku mentally replied before he spoke aloud. I promise. The two teenagers stayed like that for a moment that felt like an eternity, their hands clasping those of the other, gazing into each other's eyes, before slowly, unconsciously, the two of them leaned in towards each other, their eyes slowly closing as though they were both hypnotized by the other, and kissed. A few seconds after the kiss had started, both Izuku and Ochako's brains started back up and they realized what they were doing. Oh my god, I'm kissing Chako. What do I do? What do I do? Izuku thought as he and Ochako continued to lock lips, his face going full red. Oh my god, I'm kissing Izuku. What should I do? What does this mean for our friendship? Ochako thought as well as she continued to lock lips with Izuku, her face also heating up like a furnace as she teetered toward the edge of succumbing to the feelings she had for the boy as he did the same with his feelings for her. After several minutes the two drifted apart, breathing heavily as they looked into each other's eyes before they realized what they'd done, and both blushed enough to be mistaken for ripe tomatoes as they stammered, trying and failing to say something. Eventually Ochako spoke her words properly first and asked the question in both their minds. So, does this mean we're dating now? She asked Izuku, who could only mumble an affirmative and nod. Good. Ochako said before she mustered up her courage and kissed Izuku again, this time with the kind of passion that was reserved for someone you deeply and truly loved, as Izuku wrapped his arms around Ochako in a tight embrace and kissed her back with just as much passion. About time, you two, Venom said within Izuku's mind with a chuckle. Oh, shut up, Venom. You're killing the mood, and I'd rather focus on my new girlfriend at the moment. Izuku snarked back inside his head as he continued kissing Ochako, pulling her into a close embrace. After everything the universe had taken from him, all because he lacked some flashy superpower, finally, it had seen fit to start giving to him. First, it had given him a source of power, a true best friend, and a purpose all rolled into one, and now, it had given him someone to truly and deeply love. For the first time in a long time, Izuku Midoriya truly felt like he could be happy again, so long as he had Venom and his beloved Ochako by his side. Project Paragon Facility Epsilon, outskirts of Mustafu, later that night. Blood was splattered all over the walls as a dark humanoid figure made their way through the underground complex, killing everyone unfortunate enough to cross its path. Riot grinned as the last guard fell to pieces on the ground. The HPSC president was a veritable treasure trove of secrets and useful information, including what had happened to Sleeper. And here he was thinking Venom was an idealist, goody two-shoes than he was. Then again, Sleeper was Venom's son, which was how he got on the mission in the first place, despite being one of the lower classes of Clinters. Regardless, both of them failed to realize the simple truth. That all other creatures in this universe and beyond existed for the Clinters to use as they saw fit until they were completely and utterly used up and their carcasses were discarded. A fact this world would soon learn once he had built his legion of superpowered symbiotes and began to conquer it and its frankly primitive inhabitants. Savages, all of them, thought Riot as he approached the base's central command center and looked over the containment cell camera feeds on the console. Now, let's see here. Ah, this one will do for my first recruit. Riot lumbered off in the direction of the cell he had seen over the camera and pulled out what looked like some kind of rock or keystone from his body. Placing both hands over it, Riot growled and roared as a rush of power flowed from the stone into his body before he ripped the cell door off the cell and grabbed the occupant inside. A few moments later, a bright green symbiote with a red spiral pattern of some kind over its face emerged, growling and snarling. Riot grinned. Success. Now. For the rest. Alleyway slums of Mustafu. Himiko Toga had to admit. She'd never felt a thrill like this before, at least none that she could remember. Honestly, she wondered why she didn't think of this sooner. It was patently obvious that her parents would never give her blood so she could finally make the thirst go away. No, they preferred to lock her in the basement and beat her senseless, all for having a villainous quirk. No, if she wanted the thirst to go away, she would have to make it go away herself. So, breaking out of her room while her parents and Ashai were out, she snuck into her parents' room, grabbed a pair of decorative daggers, and left. In one single motion, she vowed to go and never look back. And now, here she was, finally, truly sating the thirst with the blood she so desperately wanted, all thanks to this nice person who'd offered to help her. The girl Himiko was sucking the blood out of was someone who had to have been quirkless, as all it took was a quick bit of Slicendus to bring her down before Himiko was able to sink her fangs into her. The thirst finally satisfied, Himiko removed her fangs from the nice girl's neck. Thank you for helping. She sang happily as she pulled herself up off the ground, relishing the feeling of finally being free of the chains that her parents had forced upon her. Free to be who she was without anyone to tell her no or beat her senseless for being a freak. Normal girls may not drink blood. But who the fuck cares about being normal? No, now that she was finally free of her parents, Himiko Toga was beyond eager to cause some chaos and let the mayhem she'd been keeping bottled up inside her for so long finally break free. After all, what was wrong with causing a little carnage? Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to support author of this fanfic. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video.